Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session of FamilySpace session, Advocating for My Child or Youth. We're really thrilled to have Sue and Michelle from Ron Joyce Children's Health Center, the Community Education Service, here with us presenting on this topic, which is especially relevant at this time of year as families and kids and caregivers are kind of getting ready for a return to school, which certainly this year is looking quite different than other years. And so, concerns about getting your child or youth's needs met, whether it's at school or with other services and supports in the community, is a really important thing to be working on. So we are, of course, really happy to have Sue and Michelle again. They've done a number of sessions through your space, and we're really thrilled to have them back again. And I am more than happy to just hand things over to them now. And if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to share them. And Sue and Michelle will respond as best they can. Over to you guys.
Okay, so welcome and thanks for being here. So we're going to be talking about advocating for your child or youth. There is a book by Dr. Ross Green called Lost at School. And when you look at schools and what they're equipped to deal with, and this is not putting anybody down. However, teachers have gone to school for history and math and geography. That's what their backgrounds are in, not necessarily child development or understanding behaviors. So we do have to kind of come at it collaboratively. However, a lot of times, especially when we were growing up, looking at behaviors was an issue, right? And still today, they're kind of poorly understood. Sometimes there can be some shaming and blaming that can be going on. Parents struggle because they want their child to do well, and then teachers are struggling because they want their students to do well, but they're caught in between needing to do academic support and supporting a classroom full of children. And then maybe you've got a few children in the classroom that their behavioral issues are actually getting in the way of their academics. And there's a little bit of a loss as to how do we take care of this. And sometimes parents feel powerless to make things better. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because we want to empower you as the parents. And if there's any teachers watching, or EAs or ECEs, that we all understand that we need to work together, because the child wants to be part of the solution. The child wants to do well. They just don't necessarily have the tools in place. So it's up to us as the adults to kind of wrap around the child and work with them.
So we had a polling activity that was set up, and if you think about what's on this list, it really is just a checkpoint for you to think about what are some of the concerns. Sometimes there can be a lot of things that are actually going on, and it can be really difficult to try to sort of hone in on maybe your top sort of two or three primary concerns. So this is just a little bit of a list. It's not conclusive by any means, and you may have other things that we certainly hadn't thought of to maybe add to this list. But it's a way for you to start to sift through what are some of those presenting concerns for your child, things that maybe the school hadn't thought of, maybe some things that you've noticed even just around the home or when your kids were interacting in other activities, things that are just kind of standing out. Make note of some of those things so that when you are going in to have those conversations at the school or with other medical professionals, this can really be a really good starting point and be helpful information for them in terms of looking deeper.
So for addressing teachers, again, and we just want to be able to look at both sides of the coin, because we are going in, we're feeling frustrated. We don't actually necessarily know what's going on at school because we don't have eyes on our children. However, during this time, a lot of parents, and I've seen a lot of funny memes and videos about parents being like, okay, I kind of get it. I kind of get what's going on during the day, or I can see where they're struggling because they've been at home doing schoolwork from home. So very different doing something at home online versus having 25, 15, 30 kids in a classroom. But when teachers are in the classroom, some of the things that might be getting in the way is that stress level that they have. And depending on who that person is, what their comfort level is, and how bad the behaviors are in the classroom, it can be hard. Also needing to deal with parents. I mean, it's very difficult to sometimes approach parents to say, this isn't working. I'm doing the best that I can here. However, I feel like things are different at home, or we're not on the same page. Um, and then not that they're not receiving the support that they need. I mean, I'm sure every teacher would love to have a few supports in the classroom. They would probably love to have more than one EA, two or three, depending on what the situation is and how old the children are. So you put all those things into a day in the life of a teacher. And again, we just want to help you see the other end, because we kind of see as a parent to say, this is the problem, this is what I see that's not happening. However, can we try to empathize and understand where the teacher is coming from so we can come to them as a team and not doing that shaming and blaming, or that, this isn't going well, and feeling really frustrated. Let's take a look at both sides of the coin and then go in with an open mind. And I think that's
Michelle has talked a
basically.
little bit, yeah, she talked a little bit briefly about this. Like everybody needs to come together. We
Mhm.
need to really try to wrap around um, and have a unified approach. It really is better off for everybody. Everybody feels heard. The student feels like they're getting their needs met. The teachers feel like they're able to communicate. Parents feel like they're able to express what their concerns are. When everybody's kind of going off in different directions and nobody's necessarily prepared, or we're just venting, nobody's really getting anything resolved. And when our stress factors go up, our problem solving ability goes down. So we really want to really emphasize this connection and wrapping around the student.
Yes. And I think including the student in that is very important. I mean, if you're a child that's struggling, whether you're 5 or you're 15, I wouldn't feel comfortable to know that conversations and decisions are being made without my input, right? So you may not have these meetings with the child present, but once some ideas have been set, or we understand where some of the issues are, check in with your child and say, what can I bring to the meeting? And maybe later on, there can be an opportunity to involve the child in a meeting, as long as it's appropriate and as long as the adults kind of understand what they're going in for. But just to leave the child out of it, especially if you have an oppositional child, it's your idea and it might be a great idea, but I'm not going to listen to it. But if I'm involved in the decision making, if I have some input, then this can be a lot better, and they're more motivated to follow through with the plan. I mean, I would feel the same way. I wouldn't want decisions just being told to me, and it's like, but this is my life. So how can I actually input on how this can help me?
So when you're thinking about starting to go in and support your child, you want to try to gather and build a support team. So what does that look like? And who can be involved in that? Certainly, your teacher, you need to create that relationship with the teacher, the principal and the vice principal. Who are the learning resources that you may be able to draw on? Is there an EA or an ECE that's going to be involved with your child, or not necessarily involved with your child, but even present in the classroom? Is there a family physician that you need to talk to about other medication needs or physical needs? Is there a daycare after school program, a staff director, just a staff person? Because you may get important information from them in terms of how the child is acting or behaving in a before or after school program. Other health professionals or medical professionals, a spouse, partner, grandparents, aunts and uncles, previous teachers. Everybody can be part of this. Not everybody is likely going to show up at a meeting, but everybody can certainly be part of contributing to building that information and building that picture or that portrait of what exactly is going on with your child and seeing sort of a broader range of not just deficits, but look at some of the strengths because there are things that are going on with your child that we need to draw on and build upon. And we don't want to just look at what the deficits are. We know that we have to try and build those in and help them learn those skills. But we want to try to isolate out some of those strengths that they do have and use those to sort of help catapult them and build upon those as well to help them have those successes and reach those milestones.
So Sue and I always talk about being proactive. Um, it is kind of tough going into a classroom, just from the previous slide, to pull all those people together, to check in with those people. It is a lot of work. However, if you feel like every day there's a struggle, or every week you're getting called, or the child is being sent home, or we're just kind of fighting fires. So being proactive is really important. The other piece about setting these things up proactively is that you feel more in charge. It's not fun to be called in for a meeting as a parent and you've got 15 people around the table and you're not quite sure who's going to be there, what this is about. So you can kind of be in the driver's seat when you say, I would like to pull these people in and let's move forward together as a team. It's also a great message to be sending to the school and to the staff there to say, I care and this is how much I care, that I want to put some work in and I want to work together. And you're going to have to move forward as a team. There's a lot of our families that we see that have had really unfortunate situations. They feel like they've been left in the dark. They don't feel like people are on their side. And it can be intimidating. So we just kind of avoid it, right? Or we can really hold on to that resentment. And then we're kind of going in with our walls up and we're kind of like, this is not going to go well, or I have to be ready for a fight. So trying to be able to put the past behind you can be tough, but can we do a fresh start? Can I go in with an open mind and see where this goes? And of course, we are going to talk about how you can prepare yourself for that. We're not excusing behavior that didn't go well, but maybe that was with a different school or with a different teacher or something like that. And now we have a new experience, and let's try to go in with an open mind that it is going to go well.
And I just want to add to that a little bit, Michelle. This is a particularly unique fall that we're heading into,
Mhm.
and that proactive approach and being sort of a little bit more open to having that communication and being a little bit more patient and it's going to be beneficial to everyone because it's going to be a little bit harder. Things are not going to run as smoothly as they maybe have in the past, and even with that, there were glitches. So parents are going to be very stressed. Kids are going to be very stressed. Nobody's, really clear about what everybody's walking into this fall. So everybody needs to kind of be able to kind of dial it back a little bit, take that breath, and we're going to talk about, having those meetings and how to be prepared and how to ask those questions about what are some of your concerns and how to sort of isolate some of those things out. But being very clear and just allowing yourself some time, allowing your kids some time for that adjustment period, particularly this fall, is really going to be critical. It's everybody's going to be going through that really big adjustment period. So focusing on I really like these little signs, focusing on what matters, staying positive. Good things are going to happen. Keeping that positive mindset, staying in the positive, moving forward. It's going to keep those doors open. It's going to keep things flowing. It's going to keep communication going forward in a right direction, rather than sort of closing off, the communication with the people that you need most, especially heading into this challenging fall.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to address some of the discussion questions that teachers may be stressed and overloaded and less likely to be patient, following the new rules about contact, wearing masks. I mean, this is a difficult time. This is a time that we don't know what's going on. And there can be a lot of anticipatory anxiety for all of us. And this isn't something that is just made up in our head, that we've got people that are over exaggerating, or are too anxious. This is real life, and we've been living it for how many months now? So it's really throwing things off for us. And for a teacher trying to prepare, what are they preparing for? How many children are they going to have? Even for parents, do I send a mask? Do I not send a mask, depending on the age of my child? How do I know that they're safe? How do I know that the teacher is going to be patient? Should I keep them at home? Should I send them in? All those questions, and not really understanding what's going to happen is definitely going to lift the stress level for all of us. And I think those are the things to remember as well, is that we're all in this. It's not just one part of the city that's been dealing with this. It's not just one socioeconomic group that has been dealing with this. This is everybody's been dealing with it all over the whole world. So just trying to take a step back a little bit, and how much can I control? How much should I be stressing about this? And how much do I just need to, let's wait and see what's going to happen? And like Sue said, just hope for the best instead of always going to that negative space, because our brains are that way. They're just made to be negative. So it's like a muscle. We have to work on it to try to look at the positive. I'm not saying everything's going to be butterflies and fairies and we're all going to go back to school and it's going to be fantastic. However, if you say it's going to be horrible, if you say the teachers, there's no way they're going to be able to handle this, if you say you're going to have a bad day, you're going to have a bad day, right? So trying to find
Keeping the
that
expectations.
balance. So did you
Yeah,
want
I
to
was just
address the
thinking about just
question
sort of
there?
keeping expectations, just to a minimum. I mean, for some of these kids, just even, especially if they're anxious kids or kids that have other mental health issues, just the fact of getting in the door and dealing with, the new setup
Mm,
and, segregated classrooms or special setups or having to wear masks, just getting to school is going to be a big step. So not putting so many expectations
mhm,
on teachers and the kids. Let's just go through that adjustment phase. Let's take our foot off the gas pedal and ease in, right? We've got to ease in. We've got to go slowly. It's going to be a big adjustment period for everybody. And meetings and things like that are probably going to happen very slowly. So again, it's going to be very important for that communication, as you start to notice, to start, making notes, document things as you see them, having those other people and supports in place as you can have it, whether it be internally to the school or external supports as well, so that if you do have to step back a little bit and then go back in, but it's keeping that communication open. Nobody really knows for sure, but I think if you keep your expectations, not setting the bar so high so that it's unachievable, I think that you'll feel like you're accomplishing something a little bit more manageable.
mhm. Absolutely. I like to say alter your expectations instead of thinking of it that you're lowering your expectations. You're just altering them.
So gathering the information, again, this is part of that preparing, so that if you're wanting to have an information session with a professional at the school, you got to kind of know what exactly it is that's going on. So do you know the facts about what exactly the situation is? And both sides of the fence. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? Right? So again, we want to build on the strengths of the child and we want to be able to catapult them, but we also need to be able to understand and recognize what are those weaknesses? What are those skill deficits so that we can try and work on kind of, tweaking those and giving them the skills that they need to try and build that up. Gather the information from those people that work firsthand with your kids, particularly if you can in the school. And I realize kids have not been in school for a long time, so some of that may come from other sources right now. But if you have people that have been involved with your children, gather that information from whatever source you can in terms of knowing what your kids are doing, how they're learning best. If your child has a disability, know how it affects your child. Everybody is different. There is no, rubber stamp when it comes to disabilities. We need to understand, and they need to understand, how is it affecting your child. Make a checklist. Have the teacher check off the difficulties that they have in different situations. Is it, bigger situations, smaller situations? Are they easier with that? If they work off on their own, if they have somebody with them, understanding again, how does this play out? And do you and the teacher feel the same way? This is where a lot of conflict can come into play. Is and a lot of parents sometimes feel like they don't understand, or they think that I'm making this up because they don't see it at school and I see it at home. So there can be some misunderstandings about interpretation of the behaviors that you're seeing. But the structure of your day at home and school are very different. So you need to be able to try and communicate again and be specific about what it is that you're seeing. And if you have those multiple caregivers, again, try and compile those notes from all of them, because you're going to see that situation and you're going to have a much more sort of broader picture of exactly what it is that's going on, and the perceptions can change in those different situations. So this is a real gathering stage for you to start to put together your thoughts and accumulate them, and don't just sort of rely on your memory. Please, like, start a little notebook, write things down, gather that information, who you talk to, when you talk to them, what the situation was, who else was involved, that kind of stuff.
So again, it's all trial and error, like Sue was saying, but the more you can talk to different people, and the thing when you're talking to different people, everybody has a different view and a different background. So an ECE or an EA, they have that child development background. An EA, a lot of them are child and youth workers, so they understand some behavioral situations and triggers, and have some great strategies. So bringing a group of people together, that teacher from last year that really understood your child, they have a different perspective than maybe another teacher that you're currently working with. So, or the learning resource teacher, for example. So everybody can kind of bring something to the table. And then really trying to drill down what your child needs. This is really complicated, and can be difficult, because a lot of us are just like, I have no idea what they need. And that's where it's really important that you do talk to your child and kind of say, what made today a good day? I noticed Tuesday was a great day, Wednesday was a little harder. Or I noticed last year we didn't have as many concerns. This year seems to be a little bit different. What is it that's a little bit different for you this year? What could make it easier? And a lot of children might just shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know. But sometimes asking them if they want apple juice or orange juice is a 5-minute decision. So asking them what can make school better, a lot of them are just probably going to say, homeschool me, or I don't have to go. That will make play basketball all day, right? But you can think of some of those things as well as, maybe having more activity is what they do need, because, they're sedentary all the time. And depending on your child, they may not be able to handle that. So, what are those things that are getting in the way? What are the skills that they need? What's going to help them get on track and get organized? Depending on what the classroom is like, depending on what the teacher is like, if your child is not very organized and the teacher is not very organized, or the teacher is just kind of one of those like, today we're going to do this, and then tomorrow we're going to switch it up, or let's go outside and do math outside, and you've got a child that likes everything very rigid, and going outside for the kid sitting beside them is fantastic, but for your child it throws them into a meltdown, right? So understanding that there is, maybe you've got a teacher that is a little more easygoing or isn't as rigid as far as routines and does a lot of change, understanding that and helping prepare your child for that. Or if the teacher could help your child get a little more organized, and what does that look like? What would that be on their desk? Or do they need a checklist as soon as they come in? Does their agenda look different? What suggestions can you offer, especially since you've been at home with them? What are some of those things that really work? And I've talked to a lot of parents that are like, well, they're doing really well, but I have to sit beside them. Yeah, but that's not going to happen in a classroom, that the teacher is going to sit beside your child, right? Or I noticed that they actually didn't do well sitting down with the rest of the kids to do homework. They had to be on their own, but I had to be close by or always had to check in. So how does that transfer into a classroom, and how do you help your child be able to learn some of those skills? Have you tried it at home? Is there something you can work on? Is there something that you can bring to the table and offer those suggestions? If you've had great opportunities, or great, years of school that have gone well, or, you've had a teacher in the past that was, able to get through to your child, or some strategies worked, bring that forward, suggest those things. And how is it that you can help out as well? Because you might say, well, look, I know my child does really well when they have a fidget toy, or, I heard this thing about having a timer going off, or maybe I get them a watch. So I set the watch for every 15 minutes, so it'll just do a little buzz to keep them back on track, and just as a reminder. And maybe I'm going to try doing that at home. So what are those things that you can do to help out and be able to bring something to the table? Whoops.
You want to talk about this, Michelle, because you have the research, the links page?
Yeah. So this, we were talking about, what does your child need? And these are some of those things that might be getting in the way. So for example, if you have a child with ADHD, or inattentive type, which they used to call ADD, so you've got a child that has a hard time focusing, or you have a child that's hyperactive, or you might have a child that has both, which makes school really tough. What are the specific things that your child struggles with that? So for a child with ADHD, for example, it could be task initiation and organization. And they have a hard time with social skills. So recess is not so much fun for your child because they really struggle. So we have to work on social skills and building relationships with friends outside of school. So when they go to school, they feel a little more involved, and they feel like they want to go out for recess. Sensory processing. So, you can look up sensory processing. It could be children that are sensitive to noise. They're sensitive to smells, to the light, things like that. So those children sometimes are agitated in ways that we have a hard time kind of figuring out. A lot of these children are just seen as difficult, that it's just like, you're fine, don't worry about it, but for them it can affect them. Do they have anxiety? Whether they're just an anxious temperament, or maybe they have a diagnosed anxiety disorder or an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, but it's getting in the way. And probably very few of you will be able to check off one thing off of this list. It's probably a bunch of these things, and then all together, what does that look like? Selective mutism is a type of anxiety where the child doesn't speak or barely speaks, maybe just whispers to certain friends or to certain teachers. And that usually happens at school or at daycare for at least a month, where they are quiet. So selective mutism is a tough one. And then there's the anger and aggression that sometimes comes out because other parents are not tolerant of their children getting hit or bitten or pushed, right? So, and there's that emotional, being able to handle their emotion. And usually anger is what we see at the tip of the iceberg, but there's so many other emotions, especially if you've got a child, for example, with ADHD and maybe a little bit of anxiety. I go outside, I ask a friend to play, but I'm really nervous about it. And they say, no, we already have 10 people to play and you're 11, so no. And then it's like all that emotion. I was so stressed out about asking, and that's not fair. And I asked nice, and then they're pushing that kid. And then it's like, oh no, what did I do? Now I'm going to get in trouble. Now no one's going to want to play with me, right? Learning disabilities, right? Some children are going to dread going to school because it's so difficult. And do they get pulled out of the classroom to get help? Do they feel segregated? Do they feel people are going to make fun of them? Poor social skills I've kind of discussed, and then behavior concerns. So all of these, and I've given you some examples of, if you're going to check that off, what specifically are you looking at with each thing, and what's getting in the way of either getting them to school or in school? And it might be a mixture of both. And those will help you really drill down what your child needs, what skills they need, and then the next step would be what strategies. It's a lot of work, but when you do this and ask for help, reach out to staff and the list that Sue had mentioned earlier, you set it up now, then you're setting your child up for future, right? And we're not doing that, just hoping for the best every day.
I just wanted to address, there was a question about some people that were doing some homeschooling may have learned some different things that maybe weren't in their IEPs, that maybe their kids were learning differently, and maybe had some better strategies that weren't identified. And I think that's an amazingly great point. I really don't know what's going to happen with schools. I mean, everybody's going to be different. They're probably going to be very overwhelmed. Are they going to be able to have, new meetings to readjust IEPs? Probably not right off the cuff. But I think having that conversation with teachers when you can, is a really great thing to do. So be specific again, take note, write down, be specific about what those different strategies that you did find were effective, and communicate that to the teacher and say, I know these weren't identified in his IEP, but we've utilized these strategies at home and we did find them effective. And again, I think if you have that communication with the teacher, you're going to find that most teachers, I think, will be receptive. Can't speak for everybody, but I think most teachers, they want to have that rapport. They want you to be part of that team. So sharing, what you found to be helpful, I think, especially walking into this fall where everything is going to be pretty intense. And if you can come with some solutions that may be most helpful for your child, that helps take a lot of the load off, because it's like, you're doing part of that work for them to help, ease your child into a challenging situation. So share that, and then, where you can, try to see and have that conversation about having the meeting at some point to get it included in the IEP where that's possible.
Sue, can you explain what an IEP is and how you would get an IEP?
So an IEP is an individualized education plan, and it is a legal document. It has to be coordinated at the school. Usually you have a conversation with, it's kind of a mutual thing with the principal and the teacher. And it's a child that may have some specific learning challenges or needs, or it may be for emotional reasons or behavior reasons. It can be for lots of different things. But it's a document that helps to put into place specific strategies that are effective ways to help your child, modifications, I should say, to help your child learn best in the school situation. And it becomes a document that's like a living document. So it gets adjusted, it follows your child for life through school. It doesn't stay the same, it evolves with them as they grow and they mature through their learning. So it's something that stays with them, but it helps them to be able to get resources for things that they may not have been able to get if they weren't identified as needing those special arrangements.
Thank you.
That's kind of it in a very short nutshell.
Yes, we always just get that question because a lot of people come to these workshops and this is the first step, right, to really
Yeah.
understanding what's out there. So that was very clear.
And I think it's very important to, like, a lot of these things that we are talking about, that doing your research and getting informed and being involved and having that communication. Those are all very important about understanding what your child's needs are, because if you're going to be asking for an IEP, you need to understand and know what it is that your child needs, and know what some of those things are that you're asking for. So doing your homework is very important to be able to contribute. Those meetings can be a little bit scary and intimidating, which is why we do talk a little bit in some of the slides ahead about how to sort of plan and prepare for some meetings.
Yeah, I do recall in one of our Managing Meltdown courses, which is a 6-week course, and we do a lot of this in-depth trying to understand what's behind the behavior, what's going on for the child. So it really gave the parents more insight. And I do remember the one mom saying, this is so helpful because I used to just go to the school and be like, well, you're the teacher, right? Like you should know what's going on. Like, what do you think? And then a lot of the teachers probably look at the parents going, yeah, but you're the parent. What do you think is going on? So going in feeling a little more empowered and understanding what's going on. You don't have to have all the answers, but if you're just going in and saying, I don't know, guys, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, then that's not very collaborative, right? We want to be able to go in and say, yeah, like I've got something to input, and that helps empower you. And you're also going in knowing what your child needs. So working with your child is helpful as well. So everybody feels like they're all part of the plan.
Mm.
Yeah. So know your school, get involved, be informed. And again, this is really hard to do right now. I don't think anybody's going to be allowed to be going into the classroom to help out. Going on trips and things like that. But that's essentially what this slide is all about. It's about building those positive relationships. You may have had bad experiences yourself as a child. Maybe you grew up in the principal's office, or you were just that anxious kid that was like, if I have any meetings with teachers or principals, I just get so stressed, and then I just nod and smile and I leave and I have no idea what just happened, right? So it could be anxiety provoking for you to go in and ask for these meetings, to have to go and talk. Sometimes they're using big words and, it's just like, I'm just going to avoid the situation. So I'm not going to go in there. But when you get to know the teacher, when you get to know what's going on, I mean, have you ever gone on a class trip? You really see what's going on. You see the behaviors of the kids. You see how your child is interacting with children. When you used to go in and observe kindergarten class, you kind of saw things from a different point of view. So how can you get involved? And when you know the teachers, you know the system a little bit better, it's easier to get that support, right? Because you're not just coming in and saying, we need help, we need things to change. They kind of know who you are, you know who they are, you know how the system works. So it's all on building your rapport and also empowering yourself and feeling more comfortable, right? Anything you wanted to add to that, Sue?
No, and I think, again, nobody knows really what this school year is going to bring in terms of being able to be involved, and I think just extending that olive branch to, teachers and principals, and just asking, are there ways that you can be involved? Do they have any other, kinds of committees or things that you can be involved in from a distance, or they may have some help with distance things that you might be able to contribute to, or whatever. We don't really know what that's going to look like, but I think just extending that olive branch and showing that you are interested in helping in some way, if there is an opportunity that presents itself, says a lot, and speaks to your level of commitment to being involved and being present with your schools, right?
Yeah, and the points about give your teacher and yourself time to prepare. Maybe there is an article that you wanted them to read on childhood anxiety, selective mutism, strategies that work with ADHD children. Maybe you'd like them to review a checklist of certain things. And you don't want to just be doing that as the teacher's coming out. They just had a full day, and you're like, hey, how did the day go with Emily? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine. And then afterwards the teacher's like, oh, wait a minute, actually it was not a great day, but you're catching me at the end of the day, you're asking me these personal questions. And so book a time, try not to do that fly by night kind of question at the end of the day. You may have to be a little more flexible. And again, this is in an ideal world, where we are just going back to school and life kind of turns back to quote unquote normal. So like Sue was saying, things are going to be a lot slower. It's going to be an adjustment. However, just preparing a little more proactively and giving teacher some time and giving yourself some time, which I think coincides with the comment here that families with children like mine seem just as anxious, maybe more than the kids, about things going well. Lots of people are stressed. Absolutely, people are stressed. Sue and I do a lot of education on emotional regulation. So being able to handle your own stress
Mm-hmm.
and your child's stress. And this is pushing a lot of people outside of their comfort zone. There's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of what ifs going on, and worst case scenarios. So if you're already anxious, and then you've had your kids in your house for 6 months, and you have to go back to work, or you have been working through all of it, and then you've got to make all these big decisions, and then you don't know if you're making the right decisions, and then you go on Facebook and you see how many people are saying one thing, and then you go on another page and somebody else is saying something else, and we just kind of spin and spin and spin and spin. And then we've got sensitive children that are like, you may be smiling on the outside, but your body is vibrating, you're agitated, you're not sleeping well, and the kids are like, what is going on? They're feeding off of your stress and going, something really bad might be happening. And I think we've mentioned this a few times, where we just have to kind of step back a little bit, and we cannot look into the future. There's no crystal ball. And how much can you control? You cannot control what's going on around you, but you can control how you react. And if you're an anxious person, if you're an organized person, if you like to plan, you just have to acknowledge that this is a stressful time. And what are those coping strategies, or who are those supports that you're reaching out for, because there are supports for mental families that are dealing with mental illness in their children. There are classes that you can come to like this that are online, but at least you feel like you're getting some strategies and you're feeling a little more empowered. Is there anything you wanted to add, Sue?
No, I think that's good. I mean, we do have some other um, things on our website. I mean, we have some resources and stuff, and we've done a couple of other sessions on here that are on YouTube as well that you might be able to check out in terms of dealing with stress as well that you might want to, just sort of link up to and check that out for
Yeah.
taking care of yourself as well during this time.
Yes, and we did do a session here a few months ago on taking care of yourself, on self-care. So you can always check in there and check out our tips, right?
So I did mention about sort of getting like a little bit of a notebook, and this is just sort of a continuation to that. It's just about being organized and have a little bit of a system for each child. So if you have more than one child, don't try and cram everything into one little notebook, or have, one of those sort of separated books that has little tabs in it so that you can have one for each child, a little section, so that you kind of have all your notes together in one book, but they're not all meshed together. Make sure that your requests are in writing or in email so that you have that trail. I don't know how much I would trust to actually sending stuff in the mail these days. But email is definitely good. Keeping copies. So if you are sending stuff, if you're dropping stuff off at schools, making sure that you're keeping copies of any paper documents, especially if you have copies of like any assessments or notes or things like that from professionals. Make sure that you have copies of everything. Don't usually leave the originals. Make photos, and you can keep photo records, right? Keep photo records of things if you want, as well. Have that email folder that you keep so that you have all of your communications set up from each of your child's teachers, so that the communications stay separate and you're not mixing things up. Keep notes on your phone. Have a small notebook handy in your purse so that if you're caught off guard, you've always got that sort of little spot to write something down. And I think if you hand deliver something to the school, make sure that you make note of who you delivered it to, and what the time of day was, who the person was that received it. I don't know how many times people say, "Well, I dropped it off, but I don't know the who," and so it could have been like somebody filling in for a secretary, and it was somebody else, and it's like, "Well, I'm not sure where it went or where it got put." So make sure you make note of who it was, what time of day, and again, make that copy of what it was that you were dropping off. And it doesn't hurt to even ask for a signature that somebody received it as well. So keep those good records. Very important for keeping yourself organized.
Great points. So if you are going into a school meeting, like Sue said, you want to have all your documentation. You want to be prepared. Acknowledging that you are going to feel a little more stressed, right? That it's like going to a doctor's appointment. You're waiting to hear a diagnosis. You don't want to go in by yourself, and you don't want to go in with your questions not prepared, because when you get there, you get overwhelmed. You feel maybe like you're not understanding things, and it's just like, let's just get out of here, right? Or I didn't write anything down, and I have no idea what they said to me. So we want to be clear and specific. Maybe we are bringing those agenda items up front when we do say why we want to have a meeting, that we're just not being vague. So, the staff can be prepared as well as to what this meeting will be about. You also want to prioritize what are the issues that I want to talk about? what are my top 2 or 3, because a lot of times these meetings can take time to get everybody together. So if we've kind of spent our time talking about priority number 7 and 1 and 2 have been missed, just being mindful of that as well. Um, Bring along ideas and suggestions, like we said, and make a list of questions you want answered. Bring paperwork, evaluations, report cards, any of the notes the teachers have sent home, so you have that proof. And also you want to bring somebody along with you. So whether it's your partner or maybe you're asking for the school social worker to be present, or who is it that you can bring by your side that you feel you're going in with your team and you're going in supported instead of you just going in there alone. And then some people will shut down when they feel stressed, and other people, when they get stressed, start acting out, right? And that's when we get maybe a little more agitated or possibly aggressive. Or some people, you might get teary and crying and things like that. And emotion is normal. I think it's just being aware of that for yourself, asking to take a break, not just pushing through, asking for things to be explained. And I know that can be really hard as well when you're in a meeting, because you don't want to look quote unquote stupid. But if they're using acronyms like IEP, and it's like, if I ask this question, then they're going to think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And then they're talking about it for 20 minutes and we have no idea what's going on. So being confident in that, and again, bringing somebody along with you that you feel can support you.
You want to also think about using that time effectively. And, when we talked about sort of bringing things down to sort of that short list of what some of your primary concerns are, a lot of these meetings don't have a lot of time, half an hour to maybe an hour at the most. So you want to make sure that you're hitting on the primary points of concern. So be polite, be courteous, watch what your tone of voice is, your body language. Be on time, be respectful. I mean, you would want them to be respectful of your time as well. Even if it is virtual, you want to be respectful of that as well. I mean, you can still pick up a lot with tone of voice and body language. You want to be watching and have good eye contact with them, even in the virtual world. Something we're all learning a lot about these days is how to communicate in the virtual world. So it's a new form of communication for a lot of us, and it's something that people are struggling with, because it is not something that everybody feels very comfortable with right off the get-go. So it's okay, but take your time, slow and steady. And again, it's that ease in, and you'll get there. Acknowledge when things have happened and things that have gone well. I think giving teachers and administrators some feedback about when something has gone well, again, it adds to that relationship and that rapport. That it's like, yes, they're not just nailing me to a wall because everything we do is wrong, wrong, wrong. They are recognizing that we are trying, and that we are trying to make some adjustments, and that we are hearing them, and that there are pieces that are going well. It may be that there are a lot of things that don't go well, but let's try and pinpoint some of the things that have been maybe some highlights of things that have been positive as well for your child. Like I said, focus on some of those strengths to build them up, right? Showing that appreciation for their efforts goes a long way. Again, keeping that eye contact, practice that active listening. That's a lot of that back and forth, right? Being respectful, making sure that you're saying, did I hear correctly? Did I interpret what they were saying correctly? Taking those notes, being short and concise, um, asking the questions, but also making sure that you get answers. So if you're not very sure if they quite answered the question, ask for clarification. Just say, I'm not sure if I understood, is this what you meant? So don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Um, One of the things that we find that parents often will walk away from a meeting and they'll say, I have no idea what's happening next. I don't know what the next steps are. Get an action plan. Always try to make sure that you save enough time at the end of a meeting to get an action plan and make the notes about it. Ask who's responsible. So, what are our next steps? Who's going to be doing what? When can we expect this to go into place? What are the deadlines? Is there going to be a follow-up meeting? When is it going to take place? Who's going to be scheduling it? Are you going to follow up with somebody? If it's going to be that you're going to follow up with the teacher, say, okay, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to follow up with the teacher, and then make a note of it in your day timer or on your phone, calendar, whatever, and set an alarm for yourself and make sure you contact the teacher and follow up about that in that 2 weeks. If it didn't happen, find out what were the barriers, what got in the way, rather than just sort of, well, why didn't it happen? You said it was going to happen. Find out what got in the way. Maybe there were some practical reasons why things didn't happen. So find that out first and say, let's try and work together. I'm happy to help. What can I do to help make this happen? Get a summary then as well. What did everybody agree on? And making sure that you're aware of who all was present in the room at the time. This is a lot to take in. So again, from our last slide, bringing somebody with you is really important. You can have somebody taking notes because this can really pull on your emotions throughout all of this. And sometimes we, as parents and caregivers, hear what we want to hear, and we may miss a lot of the in-betweens. So having another person's set of ears, they may hear things that we may miss. So having that extra person to keep those notes is a really important step in part of this.
So again, just more clarification, more ideas for why you would want to be asking for a meeting. Maybe you'd like to have a meeting to talk about, I've heard about this IEP. Will this be a good idea for my child? Well, there's going to be a review of the IEP. I'd like to be present. Asking for an IEP for non-academic reasons, for behavioral or emotional needs. Maybe you would like to have some better communication with staff. You would like your suggestions considered. And, maybe you've got some things that you would like to have as options, right? So maybe you want to be using break cards or distraction options in the classroom. You've got some strategies that have worked. I've tried break cards at home. I've tried distractions. I've tried reward charts. Is there any way that we can incorporate things in the classroom? So depending on what the situation is, how many people need to be present, is it just you and the teacher? Or if you and the teacher have a conflict, or you don't, personality wise, you would feel more comfortable with somebody else, ask the school social worker to be present. Maybe you can ask if the EA or the ECE in the classroom can be part of the conversation, and see if you can work on something as a group. And then that whole piece of bringing ideas to the table. So we just have a list. We don't have to go through all of them, but if you've got the problem of you've got a child that's too anxious to ask for help, what are some suggestions that you think might work? Because if this is an issue, maybe something that your teacher has already said is an issue, and then you talk to your child, what would your child feel comfortable doing? Because strategies are great, but if the child's not going to use them, then it's not going to work, right? So maybe you are going to say, your teacher actually doesn't know that you've got questions, or she isn't quite sure how much knowledge you have because you're not putting your hand up, or you're not asking for help. So maybe instead you've got a code put in place, such as putting an eraser at the corner of the desk, or you are discussing that with the teacher, that your child is going to really try hard to put their hand up on things that they know they can answer. Because even anxious children, they probably know 100% of the questions, but they're scared that what if it doesn't go well? So having that plan with the teacher to say, just being mindful that they're going to be a little bit nervous, but when they do put their hand up, can you be sure to at least answer them at least one time, so it gets a little bit easier. If, for example, that your child has a lot of feeling of being overwhelmed and frustrated and anxious, maybe a break card or activities that can support. Is there something in the classroom that they can do? Is there somewhere else in the school that they can go to? Can they do a calm down activity somewhere else? Or maybe math is very frustrating for them. Can they go to the learning resource teacher's room to have do math there? Maybe after recess is when they're really riled up, have a hard time calming down. Maybe they need to go and grab a glass of water or have a break before they sit down to have their classroom, session or whatever. Maybe the teacher's going to dim the lights or have some calming music or classical music, which would he or she consider maybe some of those strategies. So again, what is the problem, and then what are some solutions? And bringing that forward. So we've given you a bunch of different suggestions for different things.
Again, you just want to try to set them up for success. So, being clear, using the specific skills that they have, and again, ask to play, wait their turn, use please and thank you. Those are just some examples, but just being very, very, very appropriate and very clear about what are the specific skills that you want them to be able to utilize. Okay, setting them up for success, building on the skills that they do have, and how that can help them to sort of catapult them with some of those other maybe challenges or deficits that they have, and they can use those strengths to help encourage them to sort of build up some of those weaker spots.
Yeah, and I think this is just coinciding with a lot of parents will tell me all we hear is about the bad stuff. We're so focused on the
Yeah.
day wasn't good, and it was like nothing good happened in that day. And what is good? What does good behavior, a good day mean? That's very vague. If we're looking at specific things that we're working on, skills, that they're using their words instead of their hands, that they are being more productive and social, what are those specific skills and how do we communicate that in, a behavior checklist, communication book, whatever it is? Because what and how is that being communicated? Because if you have a communication book and it's all the bad stuff in there, what child is going to want to hand that over? That's a lot of pressure. So how is that being communicated? And can we focus on some positives, and having maybe a gauge of what that might be, that it's not just all in the red zone, all like bad, bad, bad. Let's try to put a different spin on it and take little steps towards our goals.
Again, these are just again some of those things that Michelle was talking about. This is that, did they have a positive day? Can we focus on those successes and really build on those successes? So when you're closing off the meeting, right, again, repeating what they say to make sure you understood. Don't feel pressured to discuss if you didn't feel prepared. Again, sometimes in these meetings, people can feel very intimidated. Stuff gets thrown out at them. There was maybe stuff put on an agenda at the last minute that they weren't equipped to deal with. It's okay to be able to say, you know what, I wasn't prepared to deal with that or talk about that today. Can we add that to another meeting or to the next time we get together? Can we just focus on these few things here today? Because you weren't prepared to have to deal with that. And it's okay to not have to make a decision on something immediately as well. You don't need to feel pressured to have to, just answer and give them a response to something. So it's all right to be able to tell even administrators, you know what, I need some time to think about that, or I want to talk to my partner or my family, and I'll get back to you in, a day or two, but I will get back to you. And make sure you do get back to them, but take the time that you need to talk to whoever your support systems are to come back with a decision that you feel confident in. This is your child, and you need to feel confident in the decisions that you are making. And I know that Michelle mentioned earlier, if you need to take a break throughout any of this process while you're in a meeting, it's okay to do that because, again, it's an emotionally charged experience. There can be tears, there can be anger. It's okay to be able to walk away, get a little drink of water, take a breath of air, and then come back and rejoin the meeting. Even if it's in a virtual way, you can just say, "Excuse me for a moment. I just need to go to the washroom," and then come back. It's okay to be able to do that for yourself. Much better than pushing through and pushing past. This is about you learning how to cope with that stress and the emotions and coming back and be able to deal with it in a much more positive and productive manner.
So just more follow-up. We're just giving you more work to do, but you want to make sure that you are staying on top of these things. Keep track of deadline, make sure you're communicating, um, make sure you're reporting on progress and that the teacher is reporting on progress, and just be patient because your child is not the only one in the classroom that needs support. So understanding that there is a line of communication and that you are giving the teacher, maybe a bit of a buffer with time.
Just some things to remember. I know this all seems like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. Don't feel that you're being a bother, right? This is your child. You need to be that advocate, so you are that voice for them. Yes, you are going to include them and you're going to have other people on your team, but you are not being a bother. This has to work for everybody. This has to work for you, it has to work for your child, and it has to work for the schools as well. So everybody has to work together to try and come up with that plan. We need to be patient, change takes time, and we have to remember that punishment is not a solution, right? We have to be part of the solution and continue to work, even when we're at home. So once your child comes home from school, we're part of that team. We're part of that learning process through homework and the teaching and setting them up for success at home is part of that as well. We cannot be responsible for our children's behavior when we're not around. However, we can lay down that groundwork so that they can be successful without us. So never forget that you are part of this in terms of your parenting and setting them up for success in terms of learning some stuff and getting them the supports that they need and you getting the supports that you need if there's any additional help that you need for parenting as well.
Mhm. And there's just a comment here about, that as parents, we hate feeling like the annoying parents. So it's good to be reminded that our children need us to be their advocate. Um, and it's true.
Absolutely.
It's part of what we do, right? And especially, I know a lot of parents have shared with me that, well, I've got a shy, timid child, or I've got a child with selective mutism, and they're actually doing really well. So the teacher just doesn't understand what the issue is. The child's doing their work, so what if they're quiet? I've got a kid tearing down bookshelves. This is more my focus. So it can be kind of tough, but continue advocating, and ask for support if you need it. So just some strategies and some visuals, some checklists, timers are helpful. There's calm down, take 5 breaths, and it's using your hand, and you take a breath every time you come up and around your finger. You are going in and out, inhaling and exhaling. What are those things that you can practice at home? How can they transfer to school? Will the teacher be able to use this in the classroom for your child? Maybe even just for the classroom in general. Like I said, playing the calming music after recess to help everybody just calm down a little bit. That might work for the whole classroom. There's we
There's
talked
that
about the
eraser.
break cards and the, kidpoints.com are great for the emotions and emojis as far as sharing emotions. Where am I feeling right now? What can I do to turn the volume down because I'm feeling angry right now or frustrated or anxious? And do they have an opportunity to be able to use the break cards so they can do those things? Just more strategies, copying good jar, paying attention to good behavior, And rewards are not walking around with $5 bills and handing them to your children. It's just noticing when they're doing well. So a caught being good jar can actually do that. So as a classroom, we're listening more. I'm noticing that you were sharing with your friend, that you came in and sat down right away. So maybe as the jars go in, then we, instead of having math class inside, maybe we are going to go outside, or maybe we're going to have some fun doing something different. So having a way to keep track of that, again, kid points, all free and downloadable. And some of these strategies, try at home, see if they're working, and then maybe you can bring them in to the teacher.
Absolutely.
So this is just a resource list. Sue and I have just put a few things together, and just resources that are out there. Majority of these things are free, where it's just getting information and understanding where your sources are coming from, because you can look at a personal blog and that's somebody's advice or that's their opinion. It's not necessarily coming from research or from, because they have that academic background. So you just want to be mindful. And these are just a few suggestions for where you can go and get some things. So for sensory processing, there's a few websites that some occupational therapists have put together. For anxiety, there's some videos, coping skills, breathing, and also some books that might be helpful to you as well. Same thing with ADHD. There's understood.org and attitudemag.com, where you can get constant emails coming in. They have free webinars. But again, a lot of these are American, so some of the things that they do things is a little bit different as far as medication, that kind of stuff. But you can still listen to them and understand that maybe things might be a little bit different here in Canada.
This is also going to be included for you as a PDF so that you can download it, because we know that it's a little bit tiny on the screen. So don't be worrying about the size of the font right at the moment.
That's
but
right.
You'll be able to access it. Yeah, again, there's some links here for selective mutism and learning disabilities, handling emotions, and just some additional helpful websites. This is part of just you doing some of that research. We thought we would provide you some extensive sites for you to sort of help you get underway and be, I don't know, just doing your own research and getting out there and starting to dive deep a little bit into finding out what's really kind of at the root of what's going on with your child, and helping you expand your knowledge a little bit and help arm you a little bit when you're going in to see the teachers and have those conversations.
Okay, and that concludes.
Thank you, Sue and Michelle. That was a really in-depth session with so many practical tips and suggestions.
Good luck with those meetings and good luck in
for really definitely for this time of year and getting back to school and trying to find, kind of new patterns of communication that might be happening, as well as being able to support your child with whatever new developmental things that are coming along for them as well. Because, just when you finally feel like you've got a handle on things, something changes, your child grows or hits another stage, and you're kind of got to keep going with it and not not figure that you're done, because it's continuous at times. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the resource page that Sue mentioned there as well, it is a link on the resource page for this session where the recording is as well. And that link is also posted on the screen. And we're really happy that Sue and Michelle were able to share all that information with us today, and that people will be able to access that online. And I wanted to point out that I did put another link in there to Ron Joyce's Family Resources website, which has kind of little sublinks in there to the community education service that Sue and Michelle work with. as well as the Family Resource Center and some other links. And there's opportunities to register for some online workshops that are coming up as well. That's right, so Michelle? Those are all in there.
Yes, so there's all tabs. So it goes to Family Resource, then you'll see Community Education, you'll see Family Resource, you'll see a few different tabs that you can open up, and then the information will be there. And our Grow Together flyer will not be out in paper form, so stay tuned. We're going to be coming up with some new ideas.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all that information, and we look forward to more sessions that are coming up with you I think in a few weeks, as well as later through the fall, including Stress Less for Teens, a session for young people. Don't hesitate to visit the YourSpace website. I'll just add that in there, yourspacehamilton.ca.